Welcome everyone to this satellite symposium on adolescent mothers affected by HIV and their children, co-hosted by ViV Healthcare Positive Action and the Coalition for Children Affected by AIDS. My name is Kathy Ferrier and I head up the ViV Healthcare Positive Action team. ViV Healthcare is a member of the Coalition. Both we and fellow Coalition members are concerned that adolescent mothers affected by HIV and their children are being left behind. Most recently, Positive Action has made this population the focus of a new funding round. We're keen to support work in this area and delighted to be collaborating with our friends and colleagues at the Coalition.
Thank you, Kathy. My name is Lisa Bomer. I'm a Senior Program Officer with the Conrad N. Hilton Foundation and Chair of the Coalition for Children Affected by AIDS. The Coalition is an independent group of global donors, UN agencies, NGOs, and independent experts working together to enable all children affected by HIV and AIDS to survive and thrive. We are failing in our global ambitions to tackle HIV and AIDS and their impacts on children and adolescents. None more so than for those facing structural and social exclusion. Adolescent mothers and their children in particular are a vast population that is underserved. In sub-Saharan Africa, levels of both HIV and motherhood amongst adolescents are high. These adolescents have poorer PMTCT and service outcomes, are less likely to receive or stay on HIV treatment. They're more vulnerable to broader health, social, and economic challenges, and less able to access support. But there's a growing movement behind this population, and we, the Coalition, wish to support this movement to grow and to flourish, including strengthening the voices and participation of adolescent mothers themselves, which is crucial. This satellite symposium seeks to develop a common advocacy agenda that we can all take forward together. It builds upon a global evidence review and learning session held last year by the Coalition and the World Health Organization, in which 43 experts from multiple sectors came together behind a set of common advocacy messages and calls to action. We are grateful to the WHO, which has published a full report of this learning session. And the evidence review is also publicly available, along with other key materials on the Coalition website.
So today we will hear from the Global Fund, PEPFAR, the World Health Organization, and adolescent mothers themselves to see what they think about this agenda and what role they wish to play to take it forward. We're honoured to have presentations from our panel, Miriam Hasasha of UNYPA in Uganda and Coalition Young Mother Ambassador, Karini Chalky from the Coalition, Gretchen Bachman from the Office of the Global AIDS Coordinator in the US State Department, and Annette Reinisch of the Global Fund. Following the panel presentations, there'll be a live Q&A. We have already received a number of questions in advance of the satellite, but you can also submit questions for consideration in the live Q&A by using the chat feature. And finally, we will hear closing remarks from Meg Doherty, Director, Global HIV, Hepatitis and STI Programs at the World Health Organization, and Luan Hatani, Co-Chair of the Coalition and Director of PATA. And we welcome you to join us throughout this conversation on social media. Please use hashtag TeenMoms and HIV. And please note we're also recording this conversation. Thank you.
My name is Hasasha Miriam. I'm living in Uganda, Kampala, and I live with my grandmother, my son, my father, and all my other relatives. We grew up in an extended family, so we are living in a very huge family. I love dancing, I love swimming, modeling. I love representing my country as a hero. So I represent young mothers. I do mentoring as a peer educator. I am an ambassador for the Coalition for Children Affected by AIDS, peer educator at Uganda Network of Young People Living with HIV, and finally a mentor mother at Teens Uganda. My son is 4 years and I'm so proud of him because he's my everything. So I'm so happy to have him. Becoming pregnant as a young mother living with HIV, it was a tough situation because I became pregnant at an age of 15. You know, it's like a crime. You feel so useless in a society if you get pregnant at 15 years old. You feel like you're so spoiled, you can't be in a society. So there is discrimination, isolation by friends, families, neglections by family, friends. Okay, everyone around you feels like you're useless. And when I was pregnant, my grandmother took me to a church-based foundation where there were young mothers. So I felt like I was home. In that home, we were nurtured and we were treated like usual people as young mothers, but we weren't discriminated until I gave birth. So after giving birth, they talked to my parents and they allowed me back in my family. So I was so happy that my life was going on well. The support given to me by my family was they didn't discriminate me, they allowed me as I was. They took me back to school, they gave me all that support. After those 2 years, they helped to keep my baby. When I went to school, my grandmother helped me to keep the baby. My experience continuing with education hasn't been that easy. It has really been so hard because I was in school, I was pregnant, and I was 15 years by then. I kept silent. I couldn't tell my friends about my situation that I'm pregnant, and I couldn't approach the teachers because, of course, if I approached them, they would be like, they would tell me, you're going to spoil our children. So I had to keep quiet and live in isolation. If I told anyone in the school environment, I would be expelled anytime from school. So when I went back to school, I didn't go back to my old school. Of course, I had to change to another school far away from where I stay, so that I kept it like a secret that I had a child, because if they knew that, maybe they wouldn't allow me in the school environment. Like in Uganda, they don't usually allow people who have children in schools. They treat you like you're so old yet you're just a young mother. So, but I know right now I'm in my last year of high school. It's what I can tell you, and I'm proud and happy to be in my Form 6, and I strongly believe that I will graduate. Well, my experience with other young mothers has not been good. Most of them are chased away from home. They are isolated in their community. Not that all of them are like me. At least I was isolated but brought back by my family, and they treated me like any other person. But most of the young girls there who got pregnant and have children, they are isolated. They don't go back to school. They feel like it's the end of the world. Some of them like feel like killing themselves and ending up on streets. I support other young mothers through going into different organizations. Like I'm working with UNIPA, I provide peer education to other young mothers out there. I work with Teens Uganda as a mentor mother, so I mentor other young mothers and I give them hope. I was in the same situation, but I never wish anyone to be in the same situation. So I would live as a living example to help the underprivileged and my fellow young mothers. I would love to say something to the funders. What I would love to tell them is that they should always involve us, the young mothers, in their conversations, their talks, call upon the village village leaders, community leaders, because we have talked about the youth programs, we've talked about youth ambassadors, we've talked about youth support, but we haven't basically talked about the young mothers. We young mothers also need that hope. So if funders involve us in these talks, we can find a basic way on how we can handle these young mothers and treat them like they are also part of the communities without isolation. So don't isolate us, don't discriminate us, but just involve us in your talks. It's not a crime, and I'm not a crime. We young mothers are not criminals. If you thrive and survive in life, you will be safe and you will be proud of yourself.
Hello, my name is Karina Charkey and I manage the Coalition for Children Affected by AIDS. Today, I would like to propose an advocacy agenda for all of us. I want to invite you to shape this agenda. What do you think? What needs to change? And what role would you like to play? We're keen to hear from adolescent mothers affected by HIV and from other key stakeholders working alongside them. Your voice matters. This draft agenda is the result of several years of research and consultation, including a global evidence review conducted jointly by the universities of Stellenbosch, Cape Town and University College London, and a learning session co-hosted by the World Health Organization and the Coalition for Children Affected by AIDS, which brought together 43 global experts from a wide range of sectors who reviewed the evidence and developed the advocacy agenda I'm proposing to you today. We're also consulting with young mums across Africa with the help of Y+ and UNEPA. And I'd like to thank everyone who's been involved in shaping the agenda so far. All the key messages and calls to action I present to you today have been summarised for this presentation, and they're available in full together with other key materials on the Coalition website. Firstly, the key messages. We have the evidence, we know what works. What we need now is leadership. Adolescent mothers and their children are a vast and growing population being left behind. They are more vulnerable to poor outcomes across HIV targets and the Sustainable Development Goals. Yet they are underserved, with many too far away, too poor, too stigmatized and discriminated against, or too mentally or emotionally distressed to be able to access support. They face a double burden of stigma associated with both HIV and young motherhood, and harmful traditional practices and social norms deny them access to information and support. A holistic approach, addressing the comprehensive needs of the mother and child together, is more effective, feasible, and affordable. Start early. What happens to a child during pregnancy and in their first 1,000 days determines their path through life. Men and boys are a key part of the solution. Enable communities and families to be supportive, informed, and resourced. And the participation of adolescents is essential. They know what they need and are best placed to help others. And now the calls to action, firstly for donors. Prioritise adolescent mothers affected by HIV and their children in donor strategies, programmes and indicators. Make multi-sectoral collaboration a donor requirement. Allocate more towards indirect resources to strengthen the system around multi-sectoral integration and build local ownership, and promote these recommendations amongst other key donors and stakeholders. And now the calls to action for governments. Champion an enabling environment with strong laws and policies. Provide each adolescent mother-child pair with a comprehensive package of integrated support in various settings across different sectors that is friendly and welcoming and delivered in partnership with adolescents. Improve the coordination of support and information, both between sectors and between clinics and communities. Disaggregate data along 5-year age bands and distinguishing between 15 to 19 and 20 to 24-year-olds. And use this to increase visibility, improve programming, and strengthen accountability. And finally, the calls to action for civil society. Support the meaningful participation of adolescents and young people at every stage. Promote the design and implementation of multi-sectoral approaches around adolescent mothers affected by HIV and their children. Champion collaboration, learning, and sharing between different sectors, stakeholders, and settings. And tackle stigma surrounding adolescent mothers affected by HIV and their children at all levels and in all forms. Now is your chance to have your say. What do you think? What needs to change? And what role would you like to play? There are lots of ways to get involved. You can find out more and contact us at our website, childreninhiv.org. You can email us. You can follow us at #ReachAllChildren. And you can be part of a new campaign, #TeenMumsAndHIV. We at the Coalition for Children Affected by AIDS wish to support the growing movement around adolescent mothers affected by HIV and their children. This is not just an advocacy agenda for us, far from it. It is instead an agenda for everyone to take forward together. Thank you.
Thank you to ViiV Healthcare and the Coalition for Children Affected by AIDS for hosting this timely and important satellite. At PEPFAR, we recognize that adolescent mothers are at risk in any situation, and certainly very specifically in the context of HIV and AIDS. Throughout our portfolio, from prevention to treatment, we have specific programs and interventions to address the unique vulnerabilities of these subpopulations. In the past fiscal year, for us that ended in September 2019, PEPFAR provided critical care and support to 6.3 million orphans, vulnerable children, and their caregivers. We also supported over 2.6 million babies to be born HIV-free and provided life-saving antiretroviral treatment for nearly 700,000 children. Importantly, we also provided critical comprehensive HIV prevention interventions to 1.5 million adolescent girls and young women through the DREAMS partnership. DREAMS is our flagship prevention program at PEPFAR, and it has keen relevance for all adolescent girls, but particularly those who become pregnant when they are still adolescents. As you can see from the diagram, DREAMS exemplifies the integrated approach discussed in the advocacy agenda set forth by ViiV Healthcare and the Coalition. DREAMS employs a layered approach that addresses multiple risks and also involves multiple actors, including community leaders, parents, and girls themselves. This multi-layered approach importantly recognizes that girls need both protection from violence, including and especially sexual violence, as well as the necessary tools to stay safe and to thrive in the context of HIV and AIDS. Although our satellite today focuses on adolescents who are already moms, I think it's important to recognize the key role that prevention programs like DREAMS play in making it possible for girls to delay pregnancy until they are fully ready to take on the demands and responsibilities of parenthood. From its very start in 2014, DREAMS has focused on those who are in the community, those adolescent girls and young women who are most at risk of HIV. And so therefore, we've naturally included adolescent girls who are mothers and also young women who became mothers during adolescence. And I think what's very striking at these young mothers who participate in DREAMS often comment on how transformational DREAMS has been for them personally and for their children. And this slide is showing that in this past January, when the COP20 guidance came out, that's our country operational plan, we included new requirements to improve targeting of adolescent girls and young women most vulnerable to HIV acquisition, including pregnant adolescents and adolescent mothers. And we also pointed out multiple entry points such as A and C clinics where these girls are most likely to be found. And we specified that in eligibility criteria for the programs, and so those are different aspects of vulnerability that we are looking at, that history of pregnancy must be listed as one of the criteria for inclusion. So as we know, PEPFAR has had a long-standing commitment to orphans and vulnerable children, and that has been since the beginning of DREAMS when it first launched. Included in the group of orphans and vulnerable children are children affected by HIV at risk and also living with HIV. This slide shows DHS data for all prevalence of orphans by all causes, but given that it is in PEPFAR countries with obviously with large epidemics in terms of HIV, I think it's very pertinent to how we look at our OVC portfolio. And what we see from this slide is that children as they age, as they get into that 10 to 14 and 15 to 17 age range, that a larger proportion of children within those older age ranges are likely to be orphans. And this is logical, given that the older you are, the more likely you are to have lost one or both parents to HIV. But I also think that it shows that the progress that we've made over time in terms of addressing the AIDS pandemic. If you look back 10 years, so to those 10 years and older, we had a less robust treatment program, right? So we were losing a lot more parents. All to say that as we look at our OVC portfolio, adolescents, again, age 9 or 10 up to about age 17 or 18 play a really important role in how we program, and included in that is obviously teen moms and their children. So in terms of an OVC program vision, we take very much an intergenerational approach to risk and resilience, and we start with HIV-exposed infants, particularly those lost to follow-up, as we have a very strong community network, and we play a key role in helping to identify mothers and infants who have not made it back in the HIV cascade for follow-up treatment and for early infant diagnosis. That goes into well children, in quotes, because those children who are HIV positive and have slipped through in terms of PMTCT are often out in the community and infected, but because they may be asymptomatic, therefore well or seemingly well, they haven't been found. And it goes through to adolescents and youth. And then of course that once adolescents and youth, we're back into that cycle of pregnancy and infancy again. And so teen mothers have really become a very important aspect of our look at most vulnerable populations for orphans and vulnerable children. So I wanted to share with you an example of one of our OVC projects, and this was designed in Kenya, the JUA program, particularly from the get-go to look at how we support adolescent mothers and their children. And I think one of the greatest lessons learned from this project, and one well worth considering as we put forward the advocacy agenda for adolescent mothers and the children, is the structural and social exclusion that this group often faces. Time and again, we hear from adolescent mothers that they have been kicked out of their homes, excluded from school, either by government policy or school policy, or by the fear that they themselves face of the stigma that they believe or probably would face if they did attend, either from their peers or from teachers or both. And I think what this JUA program did that was innovative is that they trained adults, both males and females from the surrounding communities, to be mentors to these adolescent girls and their families. And the role of the mentors was to regularly visit the girls in their homes, or you know, in their if they were still with their parents, or if they had been they were separated from their parents. And it was to work with them to make sure that they continue to access vital services, including antenatal care, postnatal care, that they could, if they were positive, navigate the HIV clinical cascade, to work with the girls to make sure that they understood and supported the developmental needs of their young infants. And also, and I think this is really crucial, and as we look at this integrated approach, it also focused very much on the developmental needs of these adolescent girls. And so it looked at how are we keeping these girls in school, right? So it helped girls to go back to school if they weren't in school, and also if they decided to access other avenues for their future, such as livelihoods. So what we have to learn from this, I think, is that the mentors played an essential role in working within those family relationships that have broken down. And I think because we had both, often we had female and male mentors, they were able to have the dialogues with those families, particularly parents, also with teachers and community members. And they really encouraged them to support instead of punish these girls and their children, and to recognize their role in both protecting these girls from violence and also in building the girls' resiliency as they move forward and face additional risks. As you can see, that this integrated approach employed by JUO resulted in excellent HIV and well-being outcomes for both the mothers and their children. And as you see, they already had pretty good access to services in terms of the services being available, but I think that girls were often afraid to uptake and go to these services. So they moved, for example, from a baseline among the girls who were positive of 29% viral suppression all the way to 94%, which is excellent. They increased family planning uptake, made sure that many more girls were had skilled delivery assistance. You can see they 94% had a skilled delivery assistance during the delivery, and Kenya's average is about 61% for adolescents. They made sure that 100% of eligible infants received HIV prophylaxis, and they enabled school re-entry for 69 postnatal adolescents, and helped an additional 10 girls at risk to be retained in school. And so I think this was a small project, but I think it allowed us to learn a lot, not only from the people who were running the project, from the mentors, from the family members, but most importantly, from the girls themselves. So as we continue to learn from DREAMS, from OVC and projects like JUO, and most importantly, as I said, from the girls themselves, which interventions are most successful to supporting adolescents and their children, we look really forward to taking part in this critical advocacy agenda and sharing what we learn. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Annette Reinisch, and I'm working with a global fund to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria based in Geneva. I'm going to walk you through my presentation, which is about the support of the Global Fund to adolescent mothers affected by HIV and their children. First of all, I would like to thank you for the possibility to be part of such an amazing panel. The asks for this session are pertinent to think about what is possible, what is challenging, and what we need to bring forward to forward the agenda for adolescent girls affected by HIV and their children. I'm going to speak about the Global Fund and how some of the most critical asks of the advocacy agenda are embedded in the structure and founding mandate of our organization. The Global Fund is a partnership. Throughout the entire grant life cycle, that means from the development of funding requests to implementation, technical recommendations to technical support, we rely on our partners. For 2020 to 2022, our partners and donors have entrusted us with over $14 billion US. These resources come with a responsibility to make the money work and prove that we can succeed in fighting the 3 diseases on the basis of resilient and sustainable systems for health. We were asked what is possible. My answer, with these resources, if used correctly, a lot is possible. The Global Fund has embedded in its strategy the commitment to prevent HIV infection among adolescent girls and young women. Our key performance indicator 8 logs ambitious targets for a reduction of HIV incidence of 58% by 2022. Our efforts are focused on 13 countries where adolescent girls and young women carry the highest burden. Reaching these adolescent girls and young women with the right interventions not only means protecting them from HIV, but efforts to reach these ambitious targets will also benefit the children of these adolescent girls and young women. We've heard from previous speakers and throughout the conference about the many challenges that adolescent girls and their children are facing. And coverage of key interventions remain low. In view of where we, the Global Fund partnerships, are in our funding circle, I would like to start speaking in more detail about what is possible and what I consider opportunities for adolescent mothers affected by HIV and their children. The new funding cycle, for which implementation starts in 2021, is critical for reaching Global Fund targets. We have therefore set out clear requirements for funding requests to ensure that programs save lives and reduce the HIV incidence. We are asking countries to focus on both HIV treatment and prevention. We need to address populations with the greatest HIV burden and barriers to accessing services. We have to prioritize intervention at sufficient coverage and scale to have an impact. And we need to rapidly scale up new and innovative medicines and technologies as recommended by the WHO and other normative agencies. It is possible to build strong programs based on technically sound interventions. We worked with our partners on guidance tools that inform the development of funding requests. The HIV Information Node lays out Global Fund and partner recommended prioritized interventions across the HIV cascade. These include HIV prevention with focus on those who carry the highest burden, including adolescent girls and young women in high prevalence settings. Differentiated HIV testing services, HIV treatment and care with focus on quality, strategic information that gives us the data to direct programs to where they're most needed, and human rights. This slide here is a snapshot of our modular tool, which lists interventions we are funding. Prevention for adolescent girls and young women in high prevalence settings is a complex priority and requires multiple interventions for programs to be effective. In line with partner guidance, we are supporting as appropriate most important prevention interventions for adolescent girls and young women, such as condoms, PrEP, and we fund prevention interventions for adolescent girls and young women in and out of schools. We also procure the commodities needed to implement these programs. It is further very critical to improve access to comprehensive sexual and reproductive health services, including STIs and contraception, as a priority for adolescent mothers, girls and boys, and for women and men. Already in the current funding and allocation period, the Global Fund invests about $11 million in reproductive, maternal, neonatal, and child health. For HIV, this includes packages for orphans and vulnerable children, PMCT, and, the largest component, prevention for adolescents and youth. Interventions that are also provided through integrated services. This is likely to increase in the next allocation period. Quality and efficiency are Global Fund key investment priorities. Reaching the right adolescents with the right interventions in the right location drives our support to national programs towards impact. This requires targeting and risk and vulnerability assessments. Adolescents should receive comprehensive health, educational, and social services appropriate to their life stage. We need tailored service delivery models, including integrated health services addressing the specific needs of adolescents, girls, and their children. We have to explore different service delivery models for subgroups that are often particularly vulnerable within the adolescent population. If we want to effectively reach adolescent girls affected by HIV and their children, we need to make these services more accessible. This means integration of services and making decisions about which platforms should be strengthened and which services should be integrated. The Global Fund, through its funds, leverages family planning clinics, sexual and reproductive health, and antenatal and postnatal care to address HIV and other sexual reproductive health needs of adolescent girls and young women in high HIV prevalence settings. The findings from the recent ECHO study further underscore the need for more ambitious prevention and management of HIV and STIs among women, including mothers and adolescent girls and young women seeking family planning services. I have presented to you what we are aiming for and what is possible if we do it right. But there are challenges which we cannot neglect. Let me mention just a few, which are, in our view, are key on the road to success. Limited funding envelopes for HIV, while resource needs, particularly for treatment, increase. Closely linked to the resource constraints are competing priorities at country level. While we have been focusing on treatment, we need to address both treatment and prevention. There are gaps in subnational data, but we need these data to better understand epidemics and direct our resources to where they are needed the most. We face cultural barriers, social norms, and legal contexts with gender inequalities, which influence the access to health services, including ANC, that are an important entry point for HIV screening of pregnant adolescents and their male partners. PMTCT successes are partial. Early infant diagnosis remains low in many countries, in particular in West and Central Africa. Without early diagnosis, there won't be treatment of infants, leading to preventable death. However, some countries struggle with procurement and supply management systems that are needed for access to increasing access to early infant diagnosis. And last but not least, how can we not speak about this at a conference at the height of the COVID pandemic? COVID-19 jeopardizes gains made and puts further strains on limited resources. We know from recent studies in sub-Saharan Africa, disruption to prevention outreach and condom programs could lead to increases in the number of new infections of up to 25% over 1 year. And interruption of PMCT activities could lead to significant increases in the number of new child infections. We've heard about 78% in Malawi, nearly 40% in Mozambique, over 100% increase in Uganda, and 78% in Zimbabwe. So what do we need to advance the agenda? Significant challenges can only be overcome in partnership and with investments that address the needs and rights of adolescent girls affected by HIV and their children. This also means working closely with the community. I do believe that the Global Fund partnership, through its core principles and strategic goals, is well placed to support the agenda of the Global Coalition. We need to anticipate together and protect adolescent girls and mothers and their children from the negative impact of COVID-19 to safeguard investments and progress made. The Global Fund has made available $1 billion accessible through its interventions, accessible through its C19 response mechanism and grant flexibilities, including for HIV mitigation interventions. In June, we published the investment case, mitigating the impact of COVID-19 on countries affected by HIV, TB, and malaria, asking for an additional $4 billion. Funds should be deployed soon and as soon as possible to ensure earliest mitigation at country level. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much to all of our panel for their excellent presentations. We're going to go now to a Q&A session with our panel. So Gretchen from PEPFAR, Annette from the Global Fund, and of course Miriam from the Coalition. Let's kick off our Q&A. Can I start with you, Miriam? I'm aware that you've been involved with consultation for young mothers in Uganda around this particular agenda. What do young mothers think of this advocacy agenda?
The young mothers acknowledged that the efforts, they acknowledge the efforts of the agenda of they acknowledge the efforts made in the agenda. So they say they agreed that it really served its duties. The young mothers. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Okay, the agenda stated about very many things, and it included very many people, the village leaders, communities, and religious leaders. So they agreed that it's good, but we also need a voice for ourselves as young mothers rather than being talked for. Sorry. Okay, we also made some proposed asks for the religious leaders, community leaders, and school administrators. So the proposed asks for the community leaders is to make sure they don't discriminate the young mothers. They should put them together so that they can be with a suitable environment, and they should put village meetings to support these young mothers. Also, the proposed asks for the religious leaders is that they should always use their platforms to preach against that sin of incest, and they should also use their platforms to preach on forgiveness and peace in communities. So they shouldn't always judge young mothers. And for the school administrators, the proposed asks were that they should always allow the young mothers to go back to school rather than just leaving them not to go, and they deal with that bad future. So also to add the sex education on their school curriculum, so that a boy comes from school when he or she knows how to protect themselves. They shouldn't always emphasize on abstinence, but rather include like use of condoms and contraceptives. Yes, I think that's it.
Great. Thanks, Miriam. And obviously, as you made clear earlier on, the importance of going back to school, that was a key thing for you, wasn't it? Very
yes.
important. Yeah. Okay, great. I have a question really for Gretchen and for Annette. I'll go to Gretchen first, but what are the most useful contributions that other key stakeholders can make, including the coalition, in order to support the work that PEPFAR are doing on this issue? So to Gretchen.
Thanks, Kathy. You know, I think that already you guys have really made a great contribution in terms of the background research that you've done in terms of describing some of the issues and gathering the evidence and the data. I think these, you know, we had the meeting at WHO in this past winter. I think that was very helpful. I think that kind of exchange is really very important in terms of learning what's working and what's not, because I don't think we've done as many programs for this population as we should have. And so we're learning together. So I think that that's very important, and having a voice as we develop new programs and technical policies, I think that is also very helpful. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Annette, same question really from the Global Fund's point of view. What can the coalition do to support kind of pushing this agenda?
Yes, thank you, and I fully agree with Gretchen. So you really have the coalition and partners have really already moved quite ahead with laying out the issues and also what's needed to do, but also looking at the stakeholders in the coalition. And as I explained in my presentation earlier, just to remember the way the Global Fund operates. So we do rely on our partners, in particular, and on 2N's aids, the layout of technical expertise, technical guidance, which of course is needed to address the challenges and the barriers that adolescent moms and their children are facing. And on the other hand, is the way we operate is very much country-based, although the Global Fund is not in country, but we do rely very heavily on the mechanisms in country, and the core mechanism is the country coordination mechanism, which is a multi-partner stakeholder panel or platform. And I think if partners engaged in this platform really also pay attention to the needs and the barriers of these vulnerable populations, the moms, the adolescent moms and their children, I think we could really change a lot from the policy and legal frameworks, and then also adjust the financing to those areas that are most needed. And also, it's very important to not forget to bringing together HIV with sexual reproductive health, maternal and child health, and so to address both together, adolescent parenthood and HIV, and not keep them separate. And that also needs to be reflected in the policy development and the financing and also in the program. So yes, we need to work together. And I think there are very good partners also in the coalition that could help us in achieving this agenda. Over.
So we have a question from Save the Children in Côte d'Ivoire. She notes that household poverty is a major constraint. And the adolescent mother and child may be living at home, maybe a father absent. What can we do to support economic strengthening is her question. And can I put that one to Gretchen first?
Sure. So thanks. Yeah, I think that's a real issue that we're seeing adolescent girls and young women facing, and certainly both in our Orphans and Vulnerable Children's program and in our Dreams program, economic strengthening, both for the girls themselves as well as for parents, is extremely important. So we actually have a range of interventions. We can't have a one size fits all when it comes to economic strengthening. It has to be very attuned to where that young woman or that family are at, whether they have any savings, whether they what the local market climate is to actually have a business. So I would just say that I agree with the comment from Côte d'Ivoire that this has to be part of our integrated approach that is talked about in the advocacy agenda. And definitely we've made it part of our programs at PEPFAR.
Great, thanks a lot. Annette, can I hand over to you on that one?
Yes. Easy to agree with Gretchen again. So yes, economic strengthening and also other multimodal social protection mechanisms are quite important to mitigate socioeconomic impact of COVID-19, and also which of course would necessarily lead to increases in teen pregnancy and infections, because these vulnerable populations, they have really large barriers in accessing the services right now. I mean, in general, but particularly right now. We need information what's really missing. We have mechanisms like cash support. We can provide care or livelihood support. But again, for us, it's a multi-partnership or relying on our partners. It's very important that we do work very closely with the World Food Programme, ILO, and partnerships for education, and to integrate these activities into the programming for vulnerable adolescent girls and young women, which are also including adolescent mothers and their children. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I want to just ask the final question to Miriam. So based on everything that you've heard today, what do you think when you report back to young mothers, what will be your next steps, and what do you think as an advocate your next steps might be? To Miriam. Have we still got Miriam? I don't know. No, we may have lost Miriam there.
Oh, thank you so much. So,
there you are.
Yes, the message I'll take back to the young mothers to empower them, taking up spaces in different communities so that they can be leaders and not to be afraid of themselves, because if we really care about them, they can be leaders.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. But it's been really great to have this opportunity to have a few questions and answers. I would really like now to pass over to Meg Doherty from the World Health Organization to give her reflections.
Thank you very much. And I really want to thank Vive and the Coalition for Mothers and Children for bringing us together on this panel, and also all the speakers and panelists. It's really been engaging and a vibrant discussion, and it really sets us in the right direction moving forward on this advocacy agenda for improved outcomes for pregnant adolescents and adolescent mothers. As detailed in the learning session report that was mentioned earlier, the engagement of all stakeholders, including donors, is a vital part of getting where we need to be, which is improved HIV healthcare, but also improved other healthcare outcomes for adolescent mothers. We launched the learning session report in our WHO guideline session yesterday. And in my closing remarks today, I'd like to reiterate a few of the overarching key points that are essential to achieving the goals as we move forward. The learning session we organized in Geneva was an important step in what was now becoming this global movement of key stakeholders, from governments to donors to civil society, in building a common advocacy campaign for adolescent mothers affected by HIV and their children. As such, my first point, I'd like to emphasize that we need continued collaboration and synergies, including with the donors, as clearly stated in the learning session report. And if you explore there are 5 key advocacy actions for donors in the report that should act as a springboard for this engagement. And so we must continue to be guided by our facts and evidence, global best practices, and some of the really fantastic experiences that are being shared today and are documented in the work that was brought forward today. Secondly, and linked to my first point, because this is an area that needs a multi-layered and interconnected interventions with different levels of involvement, we must understand that we stand the best chance of success if this work is not viewed as just another vertical initiative. This is not a secluded or specific space for anyone. It is a space for everyone. We must connect, we must link, we must collaborate with other sectors, including community-based organizations, the schooling sector, and the health sector to try to get the desired outcomes for pregnant and adolescent mothers. My third point is about the life course. We must ensure that we speak on the health and well-being of adolescent mothers, but we also speak about their children. The Nurturing Care Framework, which was launched at the World Health Assembly in 2018, is a useful framework for early childhood development across the life course, from pregnancy to the critical years of childhood development, and so that we cannot leave anyone behind. So I urge you to tune in to the pediatric plenary where our WHO colleague, Martina Penizzato, will be speaking on pediatric HIV. We are not done yet. This session will be aired on Thursday, July 9th at 9 a.m. Central Eastern Time or Geneva time. But please tune in. She'll be bringing forward lots of new information about pediatrics. And my final and fourth point is to reiterate that this initiative must involve adolescent mothers themselves. And here we already have great advocates at the table. It will be absolutely critical that there's meaningful involvement of adolescent mothers to improve the health outcomes that have to be developed and implemented by the adolescent mothers themselves in the driving seat. So at WHO, this is an agenda that we believe in and will continue to support, and we will provide platforms for collaboration and synergy through engaging with civil society and through our group of women living with HIV advocacy group. Let's keep the momentum, and we certainly look forward to continued work with you on what is a clearly important advocacy and implementation and impact agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Meg. We appreciate you being here and giving us those remarks. That's fantastic. I'm going to pass over now to Luann, who is the co-chair of the coalition and the director at PATA. So Luann, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Kathy, and thanks to all the wonderful panelists. Just really in closing the session, just to really highlight this growing movement behind adolescents, mothers affected by HIV and their children. And definitely the Coalition for Children Affected by AIDS is really committed to enabling this movement to flourish and grow, and particularly for adolescent mothers themselves. And just for those who joined the sessions to know that all the recordings will be posted of the session on the Coalition's website, alongside the global evidence review that was spoken about earlier, and additional videos and resources if people would need to access those, and they are all freely available. The Coalition is really keen to collaborate with you all, so please do get in touch with us, and let's really keep this movement growing and to build more solidarity. So just in closing the session, really giving thanks to the co-hosts of the session, Kathy Ferrier from ViiV Healthcare's Positive Action. A big thank you to you all, and the esteemed panelists, and to a great audience as well. Thank you everyone for making this session a great success. Much appreciated.
Thank you.